Hi, my name's Jem, I'm the Crazy Pigeon Lady, and it's my mission to entertain, educate and inspire people with all things pigeon and dove. Welcome back to this, my beginner's guide series on keeping pigeons as pets, a guide series orientated towards keeping the domesticated pigeon species Columba livia indoors, although much of the advice I give here in this series is relevant to other granivorous species of pigeons or doves. Welcome back to episode 6. This is all about handling and behaviour, where I'll be discussing how to hold and handle your pigeon for the purposes of health checking or medication, and how to understand their behaviour. In this episode, I won't specifically be covering handling or behaviour in terms of taming or training your bird. For that, please check out episode 10, where I talk about building a relationship with your pigeon. So first of all, I'm going to cover handling of your bird. Now, before I get on to a demonstration with the lovely Anna here, I'm going to talk about generally how to handle your pigeon. Now, my general philosophy on handling your pigeons is to take a respectful, gentle and no force approach, and it's my belief that if you don't force your pigeons into unnecessary handling or closeness with you, generally you'll have more confident birds that are more likely to positively respond to you. Now, rock pigeons are, as the name suggests, rock-dwelling species, and therefore their claws and feet are adapted for perching on generally flattish, if rough surfaces. And therefore, when you put your hand out for your pigeon to perch on it or perhaps step up onto it, you generally do so with a flat hand, either palm up or back up, and to allow them to step on it. However, if you do have a very small pigeon or a very small dove, they're likely to be able to curve their toes around a finger if you hold it out for them. Generally, if you have a hen pigeon, it's a good idea not to stroke them on their back. This is quite stimulating for them in a sort of sexual sense from a breeding point of view, and therefore you don't really want to be doing that to your hen pigeon to stimulate them too much hormonally. It can encourage them to lay lots of eggs and become very hormonal, which has the potential to cause them egg-related or reproductive-related problems. So generally, if you're stroking and petting your bird, try to keep that touch restricted to the sort of head and belly area. Now, I'm going to demonstrate how to hold your pigeon, which you can see that I'm doing here. And this is only really for the purposes of health checking and medication. I don't recommend that you generally hold your pigeons forcibly as a general thing, as I said before. However, it is important from time to time to be able to hold and handle your pigeon to check on their health or to give them medicine. So I'll explain how to do that. First of all, you want to get hold of your pigeon when they're standing or perching with 2 hands either side, with your fingers spread across their back to stop them from opening their wings and flying away. If your pigeon is not particularly friendly or tame, it's important to do this very slowly or carefully, and ideally if you can create a dark environment by turning off the lights where pigeons don't see very well in the low light, it will certainly be easier to pick them up. What you could also potentially do is herd them into a corner and gently throw a sort of lightweight cloth or towel over them, and they generally calm down once they're in the dark, and then you can gently get your hand over them. Once you have hold of your pigeon, and I do recommend that you take your time over doing this if your pigeon is not used to being handled. If you don't need to get hold of them immediately, give them a little bit of time to calm down and approach them carefully, and it might take several attempts. But once you have a hold of your pigeon by the sides, you then need to manoeuvre them into the appropriate grip. And what you're seeking to do is to get their legs in between your index finger and your middle finger, underneath the bird like this, so that you can then wrap the rest of your fingers around their tail and the ends of their wings. Now, you should be able to do this and hold your bird in one hand, and Anna's going to wriggle here because she's not that keen on being held, but she's generally quite good. So as you can see, I'm holding her there in one hand. I have her legs between my fingers here, which you might not be able to see clearly. There we go. Got the legs between my fingers, and I have the rest of my fingers wrapped around the bottom of her wings and her tail, which means that I can hold everything together securely. Now, the important thing about this hold is that it keeps the bird secure, so it keeps their legs secure, their tail and their wings secure, so that they can't open their wings and flap and get away. And it is important to hold quite firmly in order for that to be the case. The other important thing is that it keeps their chest free. There are lots of air sacs here and things like that. You don't want to be squeezing or constraining your bird around the frontier. You might want to support them gently underneath, but you generally don't need to do that. As you can see, I'm holding her here fairly comfortably in one hand, and you can grip quite firmly because you're not squeezing anything delicate around here. You can generally hold them quite firmly, and as you hold and handle your bird more often, you will get more confident in doing this. It certainly is a lot easier to do if you have larger hands. I wasn't very confident when I first started handling my birds, and I was a little bit too tentative about it, and the pigeons do sense that. So if you hold your birds firmly and with confidence, generally they get quite relaxed, and as you can see, Anna's quite happy here being held. Now, once you have your pigeon held in a good, firm but gentle grip, it allows you to do a number of things. So first of all, you can check on their wings. So with your other free hand, you can open out the wing. Anna's going to wriggle here. Let me just get her secured back in position. There you go. You can open out the wing here. Now, you might want to do this in order to check the key condition of the feathers, whether they have any missing feathers, pin feathers, check on the status of the molt in the summer. What you can also do is lift their wing up like this and have a look underneath. You're looking potentially for things like mites or lice. You can also do a little gentle blow down into their armpit area. That will just lift the feathers up so that you can see underneath. So you can gently fold the wing back in, get that back into your grip. I'm now going to change hands. So in order to change hands, again, same principle. You want the legs in between your index finger and your middle finger, and the rest of your fingers wrapped around. So in order to change hands, I'm going to bring it into my chest. Don't press her against your chest. Just bring your bird gently into your chest and get those legs into the fingers, and then just swap your hands over. So there, I've got her in my other hand. So I'm now going to open out the other wing. If they wriggle a bit, just pop them against your chest gently. Just adjust your grip gently. Keep everything very gentle. Keep everything very calm. They'll sense if you're nervous and that you don't have a good grip, and they will take that opportunity to escape if they can. So just adjust your grip carefully. And like I say, you can open out. I can open out the other the wing there and have a look. The other thing you can do, aside from opening out and checking on the wings, is that you can also have a look at the tail. And the grip for this is slightly more tricky. You need to get your second hand involved. Same principle. Keep your fingers in the legs, and you've now got both of your hands around the bird. And what I'm gently going to do here is I'm going to use my index fingers. You can't see here. Let me try to do that. Use your index fingers. There we go. That's slightly better. And just gently open out the tail. So you can open out the tail to do things like check on the status of the molt and the feathers. You can also have a look underneath. Have a little blow into the vent feathers, again looking for things like lice or mites or anything like that. So that's how you can check on the tail and wing feathers. What you can also do when you have your pigeon in this posture is you can also have a look at their eyes and their beak. So in order to do this, you want to secure their head. Now, you don't need to grip their head or their neck. It's more just about constraining the space in which they can move their head so that you can get a good look. So I would take your thumb and your middle finger and just place them gently around your pigeon's head. You don't need to squeeze, you don't need to grip. It's just about constraining that area. And then what you can do is you can use your thumb just to maneuver their head, so you can turn their head and have a good look in their eyes, for example. Maybe have a go at the other side. Use your thumb to push the beak to the other side. Have a look at the other eye. Use your thumb, push the beak to the other side. And if your pigeon's quite relaxed, they should be reasonably susceptible to this. You could also have a go at opening the beak. So what you want to try and do is get the beak in between your fingers like that, and just use your finger to gently lever it open. So they won't necessarily like this. Oh, let's have a go there. Oh, oh. Let's see if I can getting the beak open is actually easier with two people, if you possibly can. There you can see I've got the beak open. Ooh. Got the beak open slightly there. If you're struggling on your own, as I am here, it's a really good idea to get someone to help you. So perhaps someone to hold your bird whilst you get the beak open. I personally get my husband to hold my birds before I try and do anything with the beak, like administering medication. As you can see, it is quite tricky to do by yourself. It can be done. So there you go. There's a few basics on how to hold and handle your bird. I appreciate that's a little difficult to see from the video there, but do give it a try, and just remember to be firm but gentle, and try to give your bird lots of space, and just let them relax if it's not quite working, and just be gentle and persistent when holding your bird. I'll talk a lot more about how to check for issues and administer medication in the episode where I talk about common pigeon problems. Next up, I'm going to talk about behaviour. Now, when it comes to behaviour, it consists of two main elements: vocalizations and movements. Now, if you want to find out more about pigeon vocalizations, please check out my Pigecation episode called How to Speak Pigeon. And in the episode I talked about how the context is important for interpreting vocalizations, and it is a similar case with behaviour. So I'm going to run through a series of typical behaviours that you might see that your pigeon doing and what they might mean. So first up, I'm going to talk about nodding. Now, nodding is a basic movement that all domestic pigeons do, and it's a very generalized form of communication that can mean a lot of different things, and it's also contextual. So in some instances it could be used to establish dominance or show aggression. In other cases it could be a way of communicating with a mate, and generally the nodding is short, sharp, short and sharp, and is a way of establishing contact, visual contact with another bird. To show aggression, the nod might be more pronounced. The bird may raise up its posture while it's doing it. The nods may be deep and sharp. And they may use it again to show aggression and to show dominance. Other nods may be more subtle and small, so head down, nodding, small, soft, gentle. As you can see, Anna's kind of slightly sort of responding to this nod, and she's given me a little preen there. So that nod was kind of the small, gentle nod that a mate would do on a nest, and she's obviously responded to that because she's given me a little bit of preening. So head nodding is all about general communication, possibly showing dominance, possibly showing affection or communication with a mate, or just generally getting another pigeon's attention and trying to scope them out. The next thing you might see is certain courtship behaviours, and one of those key ones, particularly in male birds, although sometimes hens will do it too, is the puffing and strutting display. And this will consist of inflating the air sacs on the neck, stretching themselves out, strutting around in exaggerated steps, and perhaps even a little bit of a spinning around as well, also some jerking movements, and this will be accompanied by the display call, or the gobbling coo as I call it. And this is generally a courtship posture. It's also a dominance posture as well. So when I talked about the gobbling coo vocalization, I described it as a display coo. It's used to display, hey, look at me, in the context of either, hey, look at me, aren't I excellent mate material, or hey, look at me, I'm a dominant bird, don't mess. And the movements that go with this call is exactly the same. So in the courtship display, it would be, as I said before, the strutting and the spinning around and the gobbling coo. Similarly also for the dominance. And both the males and females will do this posture, although it is more commonly associated with the males. If your hen is doing it, she is probably more likely to be a dominant sign rather than the courtship. You may find that your pigeon will do this perhaps when you just put them back into their cage, or whether you put your hand into their cage, because they're asserting that this is their space and you're coming into it. Male pigeons may do this with you because they want to try and establish dominance, they want to try and test you, they want to see where they're fitting within the pecking order. Another posture that you might see a pigeon do is something called the alert, or the zoop in common parlance. And this is where they stretch their neck out really tall. They might go quite skinny, hold their feathers in quite close. And this is an alert posture, usually something that the pigeon may have seen, or something the pigeon may have heard. They stretch themselves out and just listen or look so that they can pay attention to what that is. And stretching that neck out just gives them that little bit of extra height to look around them, and usually you'll see your pigeons doing this if they are alerted for some reason, perhaps a loud noise, or perhaps they see something outside of a window. Another posture you may see your pigeon do is the crouch, especially if it's accompanied by a soft wing flick. This is a nest posture. This is something a mate would do on the nest. They would crouch on the nest site, head down low. They'd do some of that gentle head nodding I showed you earlier that got Anna to do the preening, and quite often associated with the little wing flicking. So the end feather in their wing will just kind of flick away like that. And this is a sort of a flirtatious gesture that will be done between mates. If your pigeon's doing this to you, it means that they regard you as their mate, and it's an invitation to come and nest with them, to come and be close with them, to come and be affectionate with them. It is definitely a good thing. The next posture I'll talk about is something I call the flomp. This is where the pigeons crouch down and essentially lie on their bellies, and this is a relaxed posture. No animal lies down on the ground unless it's feeling quite safe and contented, because it's quite a dangerous place to be on the ground when there are predators around. So if your pigeon is flopping down on their belly and relaxing, it means that they feel quite safe and quite contented, and that they're just resting. This might be varied slightly by perhaps tucking one wing under themselves, and they might sort of flop a little to one side, and that just means that they're getting extra comfy. So that is also a good sign that they feel safe and confident in their environment, and that they'll be looking to other pigeons, and that other pigeons could mean you, if there are no other actual birds in the house, to be checking out for danger, because pigeons are flock animals. So those pigeons that are resting would essentially be protected by the other pigeons who are watching for the predators. So if your pigeon is flopped and relaxing, then essentially you have the role of lookout for any danger for predators, and that they're trusting in you to do that. Another relaxed posture a pigeon may adopt is something I call the tree, which is where they stand with one leg tucked up inside their feathers. And most of the time this just indicates that they're relaxing one of their legs, they're bringing it inside their feathers as a way to keep it warm. Again, standing on one leg is quite a vulnerable posture for a bird to be in. Pigeons use their legs to propel themselves off the ground when they take off, and therefore to be standing on one leg would inhibit their ability to do that. So if they are taking up a relaxed posture, standing on one leg, then it means that they feel quite comfortable and safe. In rare circumstances, standing on one leg might indicate that your pigeon has a problem with their leg or foot. And again, as I said before, a lot of these postures and behaviours are contextual. So if you see anything else that might indicate that it's not about relaxation and is in fact about discomfort, then that is something that you should definitely get looked at. Something else your pigeon might do, particularly when they're relaxed, is preening and stretching. And preening is really important for birds to help keep their plumage clean and in good condition, and your pigeons will preen daily. They might focus on different areas depending upon where needs the most attention at that time, and they almost certainly will preen more frequently during the molting season, which is generally during the summer, wherever you to be in the world. There'll be lots of hidden feathers there, they'll be quite uncomfortable, they'll be quite itchy, they'll be wanting to pick off those feather sheaths so that the new feathers can open. In addition to preening, they may also do some stretching. So they may do the one-legged sideways stretch, and they may do the double wing stretch. So in the one-legged sideways stretch, they'll stand up on one leg, they'll lift a wing and fully extend it out and extend the leg on the same side under that wing. They may do that on one or both wings. Usually that will be quickly followed by the double wing stretch, where they'll bring their wings up together and just have a good stretch. And they stretch for the same reason that we do, is just to loosen everything up, feel more comfortable, get those muscles warmed up and ready for being on the go. In addition to preening themselves, the pigeons may do some allo-preening, which is to preen someone else. So if you have a pigeon pair and they are mated, then they may very well engage in preening each other. If your pigeon regards you as a mate, they may very well engage in preening you. And preening is important for bonding. Pigeons mate for life, they are monogamous, and therefore preening each other is an important act of trust. As you can see, Anna was doing a little bit of gobbling there. She's telling me that she doesn't want me to touch her right now, so she's just asserting her personal space, so I'll leave her to it for a moment. But nice little timed demonstration there. Whilst I'm on the subject of talking about hens and preening and bonding behaviour, if you have a hen that regards you as a mate, or you may observe this if they're paired with another pigeon, they may adopt a posture where they crouch low and they flatten their back. This is sometimes referred to as pancaking, although that can also sometimes refer to the flomping posture that I talked to earlier. And this is essentially where the female is positioning herself to be mated. She flattens her back so that the male can stand on top of her and mate her, and obviously she'll do this if she's feeling aroused and ready to mate. And between two pigeons that are a bonded pair, this would be normal. If she's doing it to you, then it means that she regards you as her mate. And as I mentioned earlier, in handling your bird, if possible, ease back on stroking your hen on the back, because it does stimulate her in a sexual sense. I try not to pay any attention to that behaviour. I don't go in and stroke her when she's doing that. I don't really want to encourage lots of egg laying and hormonal behaviour, as it can cause some health problems, which I'll talk about more in the episode on typical pigeon problems that you might encounter. The next posture I'll talk about that you may see your pigeon do is the gaping posture. So they may sit there with their beak open, and you may see a kind of fluttering going on with their throat. This is them actually panting, and they'll generally do it for a couple of reasons. Either they're hot, could be a very hot day, or they might be tired, so perhaps they've been vigorously flying around and have tired themselves out, so they'll be panting because they're tired. If they're too hot, you can help them with this by moving them to a shady spot, maybe spritzing them with a little bit of water, cool water, giving them a bath, and giving them the opportunity to cool down. And if they're tired, they just need to rest. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of these postures are contextual, so if you have any reason to think that your pigeon is not tired and not too hot, and they're repeatedly doing the gaping, it is definitely worth investigating whether there is a deeper problem going on there that is causing them to do that. Lastly, another behaviour I'll talk about is the behaviour I call the noogies, which is where the pigeons put their beak they nuzzle it into your hand, particularly between your fingers, or they try to nuzzle your finger, and this is effectively them replicating the natural feeding motion or the pigeon kiss that would happen between bonded pairs of pigeons. So if your pigeon is doing it to you, this is a good sign that they regard you as their mate. Now, I can attempt to get Anna to do this, but I'm not sure she's in the mood right now. She's sort of there. She's feeling a little bit feisty today, so I think there was sort of a semi-preen, semi-bite going on there. But if your pigeon is doing that to you and then nuzzling their beak between your fingers, that's an affectionate motion that would happen between bonded pigeons. If they're opening their beak while they're doing that, and particularly doing it over the tips of your fingers or onto your fingers, that is an actual feeding motion that they would do if they were feeding babies, and that is kind of a natural extension of the preening motion. It is there to demonstrate the pigeon's ability to feed babies, and therefore they might replicate that motion with you. If your pigeon is a young pigeon, particularly a juvenile pigeon, especially if it's still squeaking, then if it's doing this to your hand, that's less about preening and affection and more about this is where the food comes from. So they'll be doing it to your hand. And if you watch one of my videos about young pigeon development featuring Spencer, you'll see him attempting to do this to my hand. So as you can see, there's a range of different postures and behaviours here, and I probably haven't covered absolutely everything that you might encounter with your pigeon, but I've covered most of the typical postures that you're likely to see and what they generally mean. And as I said before, context is really important. Therefore, you need to look at what else is going on, the circumstances and the pigeon's vocalisation to try to understand what these behaviours might mean in a given context. So having talked about behaviours which are positive or just generally indicate normal, healthy pigeon behaviour, there are some behaviours which, if you observe them, are something you should perhaps pay attention to and be concerned about and that you might want to investigate further. If your pigeon is quite lethargic a lot, perhaps they're looking very fluffed up and generally have a kind of sad, miserable, lethargic looking posture, this could indicate sickness. And pigeons are flock animals. They don't want to draw attention to themselves by appearing to be sick. It makes them vulnerable, it makes them a target for predators, and therefore birds will quite often hide the fact that they are sick. Therefore, it's important that you get to know your pigeon well and what is normal for your pigeon, so that you will be able to detect when their behaviour is not quite right. And being fluffed up and lethargic and sad looking is definitely a potential sign that something could be going on there. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the excessive gaping might indicate that there's some sort of problem going on there. Excessive plucking or preening, although unlike hookbills, pigeons are generally not prone to plucking themselves, but if they're doing excessive plucking, preening or picking at their feathers, it could indicate that there's something going on there, perhaps some sort of rash or lice or mites or some sort of irritant. If they're doing any picking of their feet, particularly if they're drumming of their feet, this could also indicate some kind of irritant, possibly something like scaly leg mite or something irritating the skin, and it's definitely worth investigating. Also, if your pigeon is showing excessive aggression, and I'll talk about aggression in a moment, and when I talk about excessive aggression, I mean aggression to the degree that they're actually causing harm, usually to other birds, so their mates or any other birds that you keep. Aggression is normal for pigeons, and I'll explain that in a moment, but excessive amounts of aggression that are starting to cause injury to your other pets is definitely problematic and something that you would need to address. So let's talk about aggression then, because it's quite common for people to be concerned about aggression in their pigeons. You know, I think my pigeon hates me, my pigeon pecks me a lot, you know, my pigeon's always kind of, you know, trying to gobble at me, displays at me, and is being rather aggressive. I don't think my pigeon likes me. Will my pigeon ever like me? So I want to allay some sort of fears and misconceptions here about aggression. Many people don't understand the meaning of aggression in pigeons, so let's explore that a bit. Aggression in pigeons is normal. They are a flock species, so lots of individuals are associating together, and therefore there needs to be some kind of social construct or social order so that life can be organised and that there can be peace when everybody knows their place. And this determines who gets the best nest sites, the access to the food, and things like that. And the way that pigeons do this is by showing aggression, because the birds at the top of the pecking order in pigeon society are those pigeons which are able to dominate other birds, and they do so by showing aggression. And this is important for their survival. Dominant birds get the best nest sites, they get the best mates, and they get the most food, and therefore their survival chances of surviving, breeding, and passing on their genes to their young are much greatly increased, and therefore it favours the pigeons to be dominant, and therefore showing aggression is a normal part of doing that. So your pigeon will show aggression in order to understand where they fit in the social pecking order in your household, be that with you, the other humans, your other pets, or any other birds that you may have. So it's not an indicator that your pigeon doesn't like you. It is an indicator that your pigeon is trying to understand where they fit with you in the social order. Now, levels of aggression that are shown by pigeons can be quite variable. Some pigeons are exceedingly placid, some pigeons are very aggressive. It varies with age, breed, gender, all sorts of different factors can determine aggression in your pigeons. And it's not guaranteed that your pigeon will be placid and unaggressive, but it's not guaranteed that your pigeon will always be super aggressive either. Each pigeon is an individual, and you kind of have to take them as they are. But what is really important to remember, that if your pigeon is showing you aggression, it means that they have accepted you as another pigeon, if you like. They are communicating with you on pigeon's terms, which means they don't see you as something other than themselves. And that is really a good thing, because that means that they have accepted you as part of the flock and that they're prepared to deal with you. And actually they have a level of confidence in order to be able to show dominance and to show some aggression towards you. And I always think confidence in your birds is a good thing, because it means that they're not fearful of you. So, if your pigeon is showing you aggression, which may happen from time to time, and pigeons are inclined to perceive their owners, whether you are male or female, as male, it's probably related to the fact that you're larger than they are, you're generally above them, literally, and also you're in charge. You know, you're the one who distributes the food and picks them up or takes them in and out of their cages, or goes into their cages, or whatever else you might be doing. So they will naturally perceive you as being male, and therefore hens are more likely to be receptive to this. So hens are generally more placid and more accepting. because they are biologically programmed to favour dominant males, and therefore they'll be quite accepting of you being in charge. If you have a male pigeon, then they'll be wanting to challenge you, and therefore will be more likely to show you aggression. Now you can use pigeon postures, pigeon movements and pigeon sounds to attempt to dominate your pigeon without showing them without using any physical force. You can nod at them, quite sharply. You could make the coo sound at them. You could physically get above them, and that's just showing them a general message that you are in charge here. Also, other things you can do to help them vent their aggression is to give them something to vent their aggression out on, perhaps soft toys or other sort of toys, particularly things that roll or rattle that they can kind of push and kick around and take their aggression out on. If you have multiple birds, birds that are paired up and mated are generally more peaceful, generally more calm, although that's not always the case. So in summary, don't worry about pigeon aggression. It's generally a sign that the bird has accepted you on pigeon terms and is feeling quite confident. It most certainly doesn't mean that they hate you, but there are things that you can do to try to manage and accept their aggression and understand your pigeon so that it becomes something that you're not as worried about. There are a number of things you can look for to establish whether your pigeon does like you, and a lot of people want to know about whether their pigeon really does like them or not. So there are lots of positive things that you could look out for to understand whether your pigeon does actually like you. First of all, they're basically comfortable around you. They don't show fear, they don't cower, they're happy for you to be physically close to them, proximity-wise, for you to approach them, for you to get your hands near them, and that's generally a sign that they are relaxed, particularly if they're trusting you to look out for predators, so they're doing that flomping, they're doing that relaxing in the environment. Also, if they call to you, so especially if you enter a room and they make vocalizations and they make the general contact cue, find out more about that in the How to Speak Pigeon Pigeon video where I talk about the contact cue. If they make contact cues to you when you come into the room, that's a good thing. They're sort of saying, you're here, I'm here, hello. That's kind of a general communication thing. That's a good thing. They've accepted you on pigeon terms and they're communicating with you on pigeon terms. If they make any sort of courtship gesture towards you, so if they preen you with their beak on your hands, or maybe on your face, or maybe they do what I call the noogie, they put their beak in between your fingers. If hens are adopting the posture to be mated, or if males are displaying to you, then that is all a good sign that they are starting to consider you to be their mate, if they don't have another mate in the form of another pigeon. And generally, if they're treating you like a mate, then they regard you very highly and that they are bonding with you, and this is most definitely a good sign. But even if your pigeon doesn't regard you as a mate, some pigeons are still generally quite affectionate, comfortable around you. If they're willing to be close to you, sit on you or near you, on your shoulder, head, lap, these are all good things. And even if your pigeon is quite aggressive and feisty, if they're willing to interact with you at all in a way that you can enjoy, even if you like to do a little bit kind of rough housing or play fighting with them, these are all good things. It's important to understand your pigeon as an individual. Not all pigeons will be soft and placid and cuddly. Some of them will have a more feisty character, but that by no means doesn't mean that you can't have a good relationship with your pigeon. And I'll talk more about building a relationship with your pigeon in episode 10 of this series. So in summary, I've covered the basics of how to handle your bird, to examine them for checking their health or administering medications. I've also gone through a series of normal healthy pigeon postures that you might encounter to understand their basic behaviour. I've also given a few words about aggression and why you don't need to be worried necessarily about aggression in your birds. And I've also talked about positive signs you could look out for, that your pigeon likes you and is comfortable with you, or maybe even regards you as their mate. I hope that's been of use. Please keep following this series. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can be the first to hear about my next Crazy Pigeon Lady video. Thanks for watching and goodbye.